Are you a part of the 72% of the U.S. adults, according to Gallup, who have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the decisions made by your local government? This compared to only 63% of adults who say that they trust their state government to guide their decisions which impact their life. Further proving the decisions made on your local level of government have never been more important than now. Eric Mason is the Chief Financial Officer for his hometown of Quincy, Massachusetts, and he joined me this week to discuss the economic decisions that local governments have to make, their decision process on how they make the final calls, and how local government can act as a catalyst for positive change to solve big problems. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's this conversation. Mason says that economics is simply common sense in a language that not everyone knows, and he views his role as a translator. We began our conversation by him defining exactly what he meant.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big things I like to talk about when I talk about economics is it tends to be a field that people think is intricate and dynamic, and it certainly is. There are many very intricate and dynamic aspects of economics, and it is a field that uses calculus, advanced econometrics, advanced statistics. But the general themes of economics, especially when we attach it to capitalism and to free market, they're very natural, very consumable pieces. Understanding supply and demand doesn't require a convoluted explanation. And I feel like one of the big weaknesses of economics and of the discipline is that sometimes we tend to want to over-explain it. We want to make it so complicated that only a select few can say they fully grasp it. And with any field, only a few percentage are experts. That's absolutely true, and I certainly don't put myself in that category. But economics is largely just common sense. If you constrict supply, price goes up. If you encourage demand, price goes up. If people stop demanding something, price goes down. And we can take these principles and apply them across everything from houses to medicine to TVs to cars to semiconductors. And economics doesn't have to be taught and doesn't have to be put out there as this incredibly complicated field that, if only if you understand derivatives can you understand economics. So I believe that the role of a good economist is to be somebody who understands derivatives, to be somebody who understands linear regression, to be somebody who understands the methodologies of how we get to conclusions, but can properly explain it. When I was an undergrad, I had a professor who told me you should be able to explain economics to your 80-year-old grandmother. That's how every explanation should be. Because if you explain it to your grandmother, you're not going to be rude, you're not going to be condescending, and you're going to try and explain it as truthfully as possible. And I think that's one of the best examples I've ever heard growing up, which is, as I develop in this field, is like trying to deliver it in a package that the person can understand it and use it. Because at the end of the day, economics is really just applied common sense with a little math sprinkled in. But yeah, I'm a big believer that we can all understand it. I've never met anybody who can't understand economics. We just need to give them a fair shake at understanding it.
Absolutely, expanding your knowledge base never hurt anybody, right?
Yeah, right, absolutely, Kevin.
Hey, Erica, I'm also curious to ask you this question as an economist and in your role in local government. How do you think we get kids more excited about math and finances?
Application. Um, so one of the things growing up, I was never a fantastic math student. I wasn't. It wasn't until I got to college and I started to see how you can take these models and apply it. And I'll tell you a funny story. So I went to the University of West Virginia in Morgantown, West Virginia. And we have this cool thing called the PRT, Personal Rapid Transit System. It's these little carts hold like maybe 10 guys, and they take you from different parts of the campus. So I'm riding it with one of my best friends. He's an aerospace engineer. All right, so he builds rockets and does all the cool stuff rocket scientists do. And we're seniors, and we're riding it, and we're just talking back and forth. And he starts showing me his homework, and he goes, "Eric, do you know what a partial derivative is?" And I go, "Yeah, we use it in economics. It's the marginal product. We use it in marginal production of labor." And he's like, "Oh yeah. We use it to figure out how to put rockets on other planets." And that was a moment I remember in my life thinking like, "Oh, all this math we learned has a real application. It does real things." Like we landed one of the most advanced rovers ever, with the most advanced rover ever developed by mankind a few months ago on Mars. We invented a helicopter that can fly around on Mars. Like that's crazy. But that's nothing more than mathematics. And I think one of the things we struggle with with our education system is not making the STEM fields and math fields so tactile. Like I can see why somebody gets into writing. I can see why somebody gets into art because you're creating something and you feel creative. And I think humans want to feel creative. And we tend to teach math. This is boring grid line type of field where it's not. There's so many cool exploratory fields in mathematics. And if you show kids like, even something as simple, I remember one of my favorite questions is like, what is pi? And if you ask a kid, what is pi? They would tell you 3.14, and they could ramble off some numbers. Pi is if you take a circle or unwind it, it's the number of diameters across. And like, people learn that, like, oh, that's really cool. So that's how we work pi into all these calculations. Like, yeah, it really is. If you add application to mathematical education, I think you get kids a lot more excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, I know in your role as the chief financial officer for the city of Quincy, you've had to sort of pivot budgets in terms of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm curious to ask you how you think the pandemic has affected local government and how they operate.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about the pandemic is obviously besides the health aspect of it in terms of local government operations, especially from a financial standpoint, is that it's created all these. It really showed how interconnected the web of revenue sources are. So a local municipality runs on three things: tax levy, local receipts, state aid. And what COVID did is it affected all three of those very dramatically. It made property values absolutely skyrocket in our city. Local receipts just took a huge decline, and state aid declined. So you mix all those things together, there was no single solution. There was no like, hey, fix X and Y will be better. It was fix X, Y, and Z to make Y slightly less worse. But another interesting aspect of the COVID pandemic has been the suppression of interest rates. We're borrowing money right now. We borrowed about $40 million fairly recently, and we did it on a 1-year note, and it was 12 basis points. And it's like when you're paying 0.1% to borrow $40 million for a year, like that's insane. Usually we were at 1 or 2% was considered a good rate, and now borrowing money is so cheap. So as we can start attacking more and more large capital plans that we want to address over time. So the pandemic has been, I would say, pan is the right word. It's been all encompassing. It's been across the board for everything, but it has definitely shown that how interconnected everything state, local receipts are. And from an expense side, a budgetary side, I'll say the CARES Act and subsequent ARPA have really helped stabilize municipal finances across the country. I'm one of those nerds. I read the entire CARES Act, and I read the entire ARPA, and so that's about 1,400 pages of very light reading.
Bedtime reading, right? Light bedtime reading, right?
Yeah. My cat loved it because I'm sitting there with a stack of paper that's about 2 reams thick. And she's, oh, great, I can sit on your lap for the entire time as you read that.
Yeah, well, warm place to lay their head, right? They love it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been kind of all encompassing. It's affected many different sources. But it's also shown us kind of the good local government can do. We ran a vaccine clinic that vaccinated, 20, 30,000 people, full dosage. What it showed to me is that local government has the ability to be really impactful in these situations. And it's, sometimes you forget that. Sometimes when you work in finance, you think it's more about making sure payroll and warrants get out. But at the end of the day, the pandemic showed just how important local government can be in addressing public health and any type of emergency.
Yeah, the value of human connection took on a whole new definition, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
And Eric, I know that your career has also allowed you to work with every level of government, and you say that government can be a catalyst to solve big problems. So I'm wondering if you can expand on that for me.
Yeah, I actually gave a TED talk about a month ago on this, and I'm a big believer in it. And that is, when I say it can be a catalyst for change, I always like to point this out. 10 presidents have got their start at the local level. If you look at Mount Rushmore, 3 of the people on Mount Rushmore start at the local level. George Washington was a surveyor. Abraham Lincoln was a postmaster. And Theodore Roosevelt started as a local police chief. So when people aim to start developing big movements, I feel like sometimes they try and start at Capitol Hill. And what I always say is that should be your goal. You should want to have, if you have good, sincere beliefs that your change is going to help people, aim for Capitol Hill. But if you try and start off at Capitol Hill, I feel like the movement can be shook. But what the local level allows you to do is it allows you to interact with people in your community to really try and push whatever change you're trying to push. In my interactions with state, local, regional officials, really has showed me that a lot of solutions are more efficient at the local level. That the local level knows the economic, the regional, the issues that they all face. They know those issues better, and so they're able to develop better solutions. And in economics, the field of economics that I subscribe to is the School of Austrian economics. So I believe in prices and efficiency. Hayek, who is the founder of the field, talks about the man on the spot. And the man on the spot is awesome idea in economics. We have this concept that the person making the decision, like the buying decision, has all the information they need. And what that really means is that if you're buying a car, if you go out and like, hey, I want to buy a new Dodge Challenger, all right? You will buy that car knowing what your income is, knowing what your usage of the car can be, and if it's worth it for you to buy. Better than a group of economists sitting in some conference room somewhere could predict, because you know your case better and more efficiently. So I think that same thing applies to local government. I think local mayors and city councilors and county commissioners and county comptrollers understand the issues of their communities far better than what bureaucratic procedure would happen at the federal level. And because of that, they can more efficiently address problems. So yeah, I'm a huge believer that big monumental change comes from the local, regional, and state level, and I think it's more efficient than coming from the federal level.
And you talk about this monumental change. If you turn on the news today, Eric, all of the news about President Biden's Build Back Better plan is making headlines today, as it looks like there'll be a deal in some measure to get that passed. So I'm wondering your thoughts from an economic perspective. What do you think people need to know that they're not being told about how it's going to impact their lives? Because we hear the numbers. It started at $3.5 trillion, and now it's somewhere between 1.9 and 2.2. But I'm curious, from a layman's perspective, what do people need to know about what they're getting from this package?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, it's a question I've heard a lot, and but Kevin, Kevin, you said it. I really liked the phrasing of that, which is what do we have to know? And I think that's really important, because if you listen to other news outlets, I think sometimes it gets so convoluted and politicized for what it really is. And there are many different aspects of this plan, and we could spend the next. I'd love to spend the next 5 hours, you and I, going back and forth on every line of the plan. I think we'd have a fun time.
It would be a fun time. You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's important is talking about the economic value of infrastructure. So infrastructure is a weird animal, because infrastructure is fantastic and it produces massive economic multipliers. The Interstate Highway Act, a freight-centric rail system, what we're all seeing right now, but shipyards and shipping yards are very valuable and are great for the economy. But at the end of the day, the capital return, the dollar per dollar return on building a highway isn't high enough for a private entity to build it. So that's a great role for government to take. Government should be investing in roads and bridges, and in some cases seawalls and wave breaks and good, hard, gray infrastructure that is making it cheaper and more efficient to move materials to grocery stores, to move stuff on railroads. We should be investing in that. And the reason because if we don't, there's no way the private sector is going to invest in that and have it as such a quote unquote public good. And I always try and tee up that word, public good. In economics, we define what a public good is. It's non-rival, non-excludable. If you consume it, if you consume it, I can also consume it. If you can have access to it, I also have access to it. And that's a public good. When we talk about the interstate highway system in the United States, which I think is probably the best economic engine we've ever built. I think Eisenhower signing that 18-page bill was one of the best things that ever happened for our economy. Because what it did is it turned the United States into a system that regardless of wealth level, you can easily traverse one of the largest countries on earth. No other country has even remotely close to the type of highway infrastructure we have. And as we move forward and we talk about reinvesting, we talk about building back America, building up America, we should address our road problems, address our bridge problems, we should address our rail problems. So this bill aims to do that. Now, I personally think when it was at 3.5 trillion, I think there was a lot of social spending in there. I'm not going to weigh in on social spending. That's so far removed from my expertise. It would just be some lanky guy talking about something he has no business talking about. But what I do think, I think right now where the bills got cut down to, it has a good amount of infrastructure in it. And that infrastructure is what's going to make roadway improvements, broadband improvements. I think a lot of people who are going to benefit from this are in rural America, where they'll bring in broadband, they'll bring in 5G capabilities, they'll bring in high-speed internet. And all that's going to do is fertilize those areas with better business opportunities to connect them to the outside world and to different parts of the country. Similar to what railroads did 150 years ago, I think this plan's implementation of wide network broadband is going to have a similar effect. You can see a lot of poor communities, I think, going to be uplifted by the introduction of broadband through this plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, in terms of economic recovery and financial planning, when you look at those things from a broader perspective, I'm wondering your keys to success for the layman person to achieve financial success as a numbers guy, and how would you characterize America's economic recovery?
Yeah, so the American economic recovery is, I'm a huge optimist. I think most economists, whether they want to admit it or not, are optimists. I think it's really hard to get into this field and not be like, humans are awesome. Like we have some pretty interesting animals. Like we're not the greatest primates. We're not the muscular, the tallest, the strongest. But we came to dominate this earth, and I think a lot of that is human ingenuity. I think it's about giving people opportunities. I'm not somebody who wants a guaranteed outcome, but I sure believe in guaranteed opportunity. And I think the more we give economic investment into different communities that haven't received economic investment, you're going to see more and more greater outcomes. And for America to get back on track, I think America's already on the right track. I think it's more about putting, more fuel into the engine. I think it's more about giving people who may not have the best starting advantages, giving them more opportunities to develop talents, to develop ideas. One of my favorite theories I've ever heard in economics is called the Einstein theory. And what the Einstein theory question is, hey, how come after World War II we saw this explosion in ideas? Like, how come we went from like 1930, where it was like, not everybody has cell phone, not everybody has telephones, like, to post World War II, where it was like people were flying on airplanes, like aluminum bodied airplanes. And yeah, war is the mother of invention in a lot of times, just as much as necessity is. But what it did, the Einstein theory is that you had all these people from rural America, all right, who were, destined to be like my grandfather, to be a farmhand, who got drafted or joined Marine Corps, and they got the opportunity to be educated. So after the war, they got to learn. They got to get educated, a more formal, maybe classic education, and this developed into all these new great ideas, from vacuum tubes to even like the first modern like interconnectivity between computers, but moving to resistors and to space travel. I mean, it is crazy to think about it. We went from like canvas planes at the start of World War II, which is like 1940, to before 1970, we were on the moon. Like, that's a huge technological jump so quickly. And a lot of that was caused by giving people who normally wouldn't have the opportunity chances. My grandfather grew up in a small town in Philippi, West Virginia. He's one of like 9 kids. And what World War II did for his family is that it gave them access to education they could never even dream of. And so a lot of his family became successful just because they had the opportunity. So as we talk about building back America, we talk about these investments in infrastructure, these investments into the success of the nation. I think it's the success of the nation comes from just giving people opportunity. And I really do think this plan has a chance to do that.
Yeah, you talk about giving people an opportunity. And Eric, I don't know if you knew this, but October also marks National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And I myself was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. It simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think are the financial benefits of infusing individuals with disabilities into the workforce?
Oh, I think the financial benefits in it are almost immeasurable. So I've actually talked before on ADA advocacy. I have type 1 diabetes. I have people in my office with ADA issues. I have a gentleman who works in my office who has CP. I have a gentleman in my office who's legally blind. And what I've learned is that it, just like with type 1 diabetes affects everybody differently, that giving people with, and I don't even like to use the word disability, because I've seen them be more able than traditionally able-bodied people. What it does, it brings a different perspective. I can't tell you how, like, I'll give you a real life example. We're moving to a much more automated paperless system here. And the gentleman in my office who has vision issues, he's absolutely brilliant, and he's a great finance mind. So I said to him, he understands our AP system better than I do. He just does. He's brilliant at AP. So I asked him, I said, I go, do you want to run this program? He goes, yeah. And one of the reasons he's been so successful at it is he has vision problems. His computer is a high contrast computer. So if you hand him a piece of paper, he has a difficult time reading it. But if it's on his computer screen, he can read it. He can read it better. I don't want to say read it perfectly. So he understands how to optimize everything for computer usage. So by putting him in a position where he's leading our entire city's digitization platform for our AP system, he's the best person in the world. He's better than me because he knows everything has to be on a computer. He knows how to make it readable, because he spends his whole time looking to optimize that. So I'm selfish. I looked at that and said, I'm going to take advantage of that. That's somebody with a great talent who A, knows how to do it, and B, understands it at a far more intricate level than I do. And he's going to apply that and make it a better system. So, but this story can play out over and over and over again at everything from local government to Fortune 500 companies to small businesses down the street. I think one of the biggest travesties in human history is the fact that for a long time people with who were different bodied, they were looked at as like, oh, what can they bring to the table? A lot. The answer is very simply a lot, and there's a huge economic benefit to bringing on people with who don't have traditional access. I mean, think of all the brilliant minds who were cast aside because they had impairments that had no bearing on their ability to perform a job. From a pure labor economic standpoint, that is just wasted resources. It's just like you have somebody with a brilliant mind, but because they may struggle, they need to take an elevator instead of a stairs, you're going to demean that person? No, that's a waste of economic talent. And I know it sounds selfish to put it in the terms of economic talent, but when I've spoken on this previously, that's what I always tell them. Like I asked him, I was in front of a group of business people maybe about 5 years ago. I said, does anybody know what the average cost to make an ADA compliant bathroom is? And people, I had one guy, 50,000, 25,000. I go, $5,300. That is the average cost to make an ADA compliant bathroom. And that bathroom will last 20 years of ADA compliance for $5,300. I go, how much do you think you think you hire somebody? They're not going to get you $5,300 in profit over the course of 20 years? And everybody's like, no, if you hire somebody, you definitely get more than that. So what's the turnoff? But I've known so many people who try to do the mental gymnastics to make it not make sense. But what the rational economic view of it is that bringing on people who have different capacities, both physical and mental, can bring a huge amount of different perspective, which can make you more efficient, and they're just efficient workers too. In fact, people who fall into traditional ADA categories have much longer tenure at companies. And you ask any HR director, what's the biggest cost to a company? They'll say training new people. So you have a cohort that sticks around longer and are traditionally just as efficient. And then I hear people say, well, it's difficult to bring them on. I'm like, no, it's not, and they stay on longer. So the economic benefit of bringing on people with disabilities I think is very high. And I personally have seen it in my job as somebody who is disabled and somebody who has people in my office who have those issues. I'm very productive. I think that a company can only benefit from bringing on.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing your first-hand account of something that's very, very near and dear to my heart and very important as well. But I know that you work for your hometown city as their chief financial officer, and I also know that you're currently studying for your master's in applied economics. So, a two-part question for you. Tell me about being a lifelong learner and the pride that you have representing your local government for your hometown, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll lead off with the pride. So I'm a townie. I love Quincy. My poor wife, she's from the South. I do not shop about how awesome Quincy is. Like anytime anything comes up, I'm like, well, actually, Quincy, well, actually, great. Like we have two presidents. The modern teaching is called Quincy Model. That was made by Francis Parker from here. We had a shipyard that built battleships. The first commercial railroad was here. I'm just one of those guys where I just love my city. I grew up in a small business, so my family owns a gas station. And so many of the people I work with and many of the constituents I deal with, I pump the gas at some point in my life. So I'll have people call me up and be like, hi, I need to speak to Eric Mason. I think he's the director of municipal finance. And they'll call me up like, hi, how's it going, Eric Mason? And they'll go back and forth. And I kind of have a deep voice that I think people recognize on the phone. They go, you sound familiar. Were you involved in X? No. Were you involved in Y? No. I'll go, do you ever buy gas? Yeah, I probably pumped your gas when I was younger. And so I love that. I love that it's a big city. It's a city of 100,000+ people. But to be able to work to better it in a city that educated me, a city where I go to church, a city where I grew up, a city where my parents live, like, I don't know, it's awesome. It makes you care. I don't think I would ever care more about a job like this if I wasn't doing it for my hometown. It's like you want to make where you grew up, a city that's given you so much. It's like you want to try and give back to it. And mentioning I'm currently a graduate student at Western University's Master's in Applied Economics. And I've had a few people say to me, like, wow, you went back for applied economics, not like a Master's in Public Administration or an MBA. And one of the reasons I went back for it is my job, I'm very fortunate enough where I deal with a lot of traditional MBA and MPA problems. So I get a great real life education in fields like that. The Master's in Applied Economics that WVU offers is awesome. Like it's advanced analytics, it's database management, it's traditional econ courses like labor and health and public. And I liked it because it was something I don't necessarily get to practice as often as I want to at work. And I think part of being a lifelong learner is that you have to find new fields that you enjoy and new fields that you can, for lack of a better word, attack and try and learn and understand. So I've always seen like one of the keys to being a lifelong learner is that beautiful feeling that when you enter into a new field, knowing you know absolutely nothing, and then slowly working to build your way up to becoming an expert in it, or at least becoming well versed in it. And yeah, so I part of my biggest thing about being a lifelong learner is I like that awkward feeling of knowing absolutely nothing. I think that's one of the best feelings in the world. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I have such a respect for the show you put together, because all the awesome people you interview, I watch it and I go, he's amazingly well versed in these things. Like, I'm watching you interview these people, I'm like, this is really fascinating to watch Kevin do this, to transition from people in sports to people in government to people in finance and banking. I'm like this is a real talent to be able to absorb stuff that quick. I would be spun around 6 ways to Sunday if I had to alternate between all those different disciplines.
Well, yeah, I certainly appreciate the compliment, and I appreciate you watching for sure. And I have to repay the favor somehow, buddy. But I want to ask you this final question in terms of your own personal and professional legacy, buddy. I'm wondering if you can tell me how you would want that to be defined. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I'm a religious guy, and I believe that God gives you talents. Right? He gives you talents, and He says to us, you need to do something about it. Like I always think it's one of the biggest follies is to be given such a good talent, no matter what your talent is, whether it's journalism, whether it's I'm good with a calculator, is to use that whatever little talent you've been given and try and make the world a better place. And it's funny, I get asked this when I'm on other shows about like a call to action, and they're always asking me like, "Oh, is there a book or something you recommend?" And I always say, like, I go on I like to do these to talk on stuff like this because I just want people to understand that economics doesn't have to be a convoluted field. It doesn't have to be something scary that people shouldn't want to understand. I don't want anybody to feel demeaned that like, oh, I'm not smart enough. I've heard people say, I'm not smart enough to know this stuff, which is insane. Everybody is valid and competent enough. I've never met anybody who can't understand this field. So in terms of my legacy, I'm not, it's something as a young man, I hopefully won't have to define anytime soon, is, I want to be somebody who, tries to be that little chirp in the corner saying, no, you can understand economics. It's something that you can understand. You can apply it in your life. You can use it when you vote, when you make financial decisions. That this field exists to help make your life better. That's all economics does. All economics is about is making the world more efficient, making people more money. Right? Economics tries to lift all boats. So my legacy will be somebody who tries to open that door for many people as possible to understand economics.
Fantastic. And Eric, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
The number one way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I accept every connection request. I try to answer every message I get. I think that's the best platform for a lot of the stuff I do. And so if anybody's ever interested in getting in touch with me, LinkedIn, I'm usually one of the, if you type in Eric Mason economics, Eric Mason finance, I'm usually one of the top names that pop up. Yeah, that's the best way to reach me.
Fantastic. Well, Eric, I really enjoyed our conversation about the impact of economics and local government, and I want to thank you for being here today. Your time, energy, and efforts on my behalf are most appreciated, buddy.
Kevin, thank you for having me on. I really say you do. Like I said, you do a great job. It was a blast being able to sit here and talk to you for a little bit.